The human brain, which is part of our central nervous system, can be studied by looking at 4 specialized regions, which include the cerebrum, which is the largest portion of our brain, the cerebellum, which is going to be in the posterior part of your brain, like at the base of the back part of your neck, the diencephalon, right here about the bottom part of the brain, and the brainstem, which is going to be connecting the brain with the spinal cord. Let's take a look at these regions individually and see what we can learn about their structure and their function. The cerebrum is going to be responsible for controlling all of your skeletal muscle activities. The cerebrum is going to be the part of the brain that is going to be active every time you are awake and alert, involved in activities such as watching your surroundings, experiencing life in a classroom, when you're watching a sport, when you're enjoying a social activity, learning, which is what you're trying to do right now. That is going to be the part of the brain that is responsible for that is going to be your cerebrum. Also memory, hopefully remembering the things you've learned, and perception, how you see, how you perceive your surrounding environment. The cerebellum is going to be, like I said, in the posterior portion of your brain towards the back of your neck. That is going to also be responsible for certain kinds of movement, but especially movement that has to do with sequences. When you think, for example, about athletes and how they have to perform a particular sport, imagine the Olympics, and you see someone who's going to dive. When you see someone who plays golf approaching the tee, and the motions they go through, a basketball player, and the routine they go through before they make their free throws. So all of those kinds of activities that involve movement, learning how to execute a particular physical activity, like in the case of sports, that is going to be controlled by this part of the brain known as the cerebellum. The diencephalon is going to be found kind of like at the seat of the brain, and it's going to include a thalamus, which is the larger part of the diencephalon. There's also going to be a hypothalamus, which many people describe as the mother gland, because of many of the secretions from the hypothalamus control many of our activities. Some of the secretions of the hypothalamus can also be stored in the pituitary gland. There's also going to be an epithalamus. You don't see epithalamus here on my slide, but it's going to be mostly this structure we know as the pineal gland. The pineal gland, as we'll see in a moment, is going to be responsible for capturing information that has to do with day length, how long days are. And that is going to be important in controlling our biological clocks. Then we're going to see the brainstem, and the brainstem is going to be consisting of the midbrain, the pons, and the medulla or medulla oblongata. Sometimes people say medulla. It's the pronunciation. As you know, it's not as important to me, but it's important to me that you know these terms really well, how to write them, but even more importantly, what they do, what they mean. Let's concentrate for a moment on the midbrain. The midbrain is going to be receiving information from the spinal cord, from sensory organs. It's going to be sending it to other parts of the brain. That's going to be one of the functions of the midbrain. The pons and the medulla will be taking also information from the spinal cord and passing them over to the midbrain and the forebrain. So there's going to be a lot of neurons here that are going to be involved in the relaying of information and a little bit of processing of information, as we're about to see more details concerning the medulla. It is here where some of the responses of your body that have to do with emergency situations, for example, blood vessel activity, vasoconstriction, when you're feeling cold, and constriction of vessels can help regulate your temperature by retaining more of your heat. Swallowing is going to be a function that is controlled by the medulla oblongata. Also vomiting, the process of digestion will be coordinated by nerve cells that are located in this region of the brain. Another important function that is going to be performed by both components of the brainstem and also the cerebrum, which is this main part of our brain, is going to be arousal and sleep. We all go through periods of activity during the day. That is going to be when you go to work, when you study, when you play, when you relax, and there's also going to be the process of sleep. Sleep is really important for the brain, and I want to stress this and hopefully make an impression in you. Without sleep, functions of the brain like learning and memory are going to be seriously impaired. This is something that is not necessarily addressed in the textbook, but for me personally, I like to sleep. And I want to tell you that I often feel my mind feels sharper. I feel like ready to engage in mental activity after I take a nap in the middle of the day. Yes, it's a Hispanic thing. All Hispanics like to take naps. But it's not only Hispanics. There are many cultures around the world where people take a nap in the middle of the day. Here's what happens during sleep, and this is not mentioned in the textbook. I mentioned before the production of cerebrospinal fluids that are going to be providing nourishment, delivering nutrients, and also providing maintenance for nerve cells. And those are going to be produced in special compartments, cavities in the brain, which we call ventricles. And what happens during sleep is that the space between nerve cells increases to allow more of the cerebrospinal fluid to remove wastes and provide nourishment. When people deprive themselves from sleep, their ability to make decisions becomes impaired. In fact, going for a long period of time without sleeping can also lead to dementia and craziness. But if you're thinking, what are all the things you can do to really improve your performance on exams, to really do well and remember the things you've studied before, enhancing your memory? Sleep is one of those unsung heroes. People who study in advance, days in advance before an exam, and sleep really well the night before an exam do so much better, perform so much better at these types of activities. And the reason is, as I mentioned before, there's going to be an increased flow of cerebrospinal fluid in between the neurons that are making up all of these parts of the cerebrum, and where thinking and where memory and where learning is going to be taking place. Arousal and sleep is also going to be controlled in part by the reticular formation. And this reticular formation is highlighted here in green. You can see that part of it is going to be in the pons and the medulla oblongata. This is the pons right here. And parts of it are going to be right here at the seat of the cerebrum as well. Biological clocks is another important function of your brain. The cycles of sleep and arousal, wakefulness, activity are going to be examples of circadian rhythms. I think I mentioned this to you before, but my period when I'm most productive, when I produce my best work, actually happens to be between 7 in the morning and noon. After noon, after I eat, my brain really slows down and I need to take a nap to recharge. And so later, between 2 and 5 p.m., once again, I enter a period of high performance. And that's what I'm doing right now. I'm recording this video. It's about, let's see, it's, I don't know if you can see my watch, come on. It's 3:44 p.m. And so, yes, I'm productive. I can do things. I will not be making videos for you at nighttime because that's another time when my activity goes down. So these repetitive 24-hour patterns of behavior is what we learned before as under the name of circadian rhythm. Circ meaning circular, and dn means day. So patterns of behavior that repeat, they go in circles day after day after day. That's a circadian rhythm. And if you missed it in the previous exam, don't miss it this time around. Okay, so we have biological clocks. Biological clocks in animals and in humans require two components. One component of the biological clock is going to be what we call an entrainer, something that sets and resets our biological clocks. And that is going to be light. The length of the day informs animals, for example, when it's winter, the days are going to be shorter in the winter, and when spring is approaching because the days get longer again. That information on day length actually is processed through the eyes, sensory neurons in the eyes, pass that information over to the pineal gland, which is located right here. That's the epithalamus we mentioned before. And the pineal gland is going to be producing a hormone called melatonin that is going to be responsible for your daily patterns of activity. So going out during the daytime, even if the days are overcast, helps maintain your biological clock at the right time. In addition to this entrainer, this resetting of your biological clock, all biological clocks require a pacemaker, which is going to be a group of neurons, specialist neurons, in a region of the hypothalamus known as the suprachiasmatic nucleus. Secretions from the suprachiasmatic nucleus can influence other glands, like thyroid glands and the pituitary, to secrete hormones that control your periods of activity. And so, two things to remember about biological clocks. They require something to reset the clock, and that is going to be daylight for most animals. Temperature in some cases when animals live underground and they're not exposed to light. And the other one's going to be the actual pacemaker, what keeps your activities going at the right time, and that is going to be a suprachiasmatic nucleus. Emotions is another part of our daily experiences that are controlled by the brain. Emotions are going to be controlled by something called the limbic system. There are going to be three structures here: the amygdala, the hippocampus, and parts of the thalamus. Here's the amygdala, here's the thalamus, and the hippocampus is going to be right here, just behind the amygdala. One interesting thing about the hippocampus in animals is that it's also responsible for storing memory that has to do with spaces. For example, if you close your eyes, you will know exactly, depending on where you are, what is found on your right-hand side. Now, my right-hand side is going to be the door that goes to my backyard. And here on my left-hand side is going to be a door that leads over to the garage. So I don't need to see those things. Those images, those memories, the space arrangement of the place where I am is going to be stored here in the hippocampus. And so it happens that many times our emotions can be triggered by images, by being in one place. If something bad happened in one place you're visiting, the images coming to your brain are going to trigger those emotions that are negative. Perhaps there's a place that makes you really happy. Maybe it's a place you enjoy visiting with friends, a significant other, I don't know, maybe your children if you have any. And when you go to that place, you don't even have to be with those people, but just being there makes your emotions feel happy. And that is because of this component of the limbic system, which is the hippocampus, where images and mental maps are going to be stored. The amygdala is going to be more of the place where the memory for the emotions is going to be. Another interesting detail that I noticed is that when you look at this limbic system, it's also going to have an association with the olfactory bulbs, which of course have something to do with the sense of smell. And it may be for some people that it is completely unconnected to the place, disconnected from the place you're at, but maybe a smell triggers something. Here, where I live, there's a lot of lavender. And every time I smell lavender, makes me think of home. And so that the emotion, the feeling happy and secure and a place where you can rest, that's exactly the types of emotions that come to me when I smell lavender. And so the point of this slide is to show you that there are going to be parts of your brain that are going to be also responsible for controlling your emotions, and that's the limbic system. I have one more video to make for you, and it has to do with more details about the function of the brain.